I'm supposed to talk. Okay, that explains it. So, welcome. I haven't provided any description for this presentation to a video, only the title. So you guys really took a leap of faith coming here. You don't know absolutely nothing about what I'm going to say. I see a couple of my colleagues, so I'm sure they came here just because they don't want me to. Yeah, okay. But still, I appreciate you coming here. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to have to tell you a couple of things about me and about the presentation, but I will take some time and we'll go through that in a bit. The topic is actually, I think, is better highlighted through this small icon I added here. Most of you will probably know about what this is about. Yeah. And the question is, why do we want to make programming great again? And I have a couple of reasons. First of all, I've been doing this for like 30 years or so, and I've been working with many teams, and I've seen many complaints between different people, different ages, different generations, so to speak, complaining about those on the other side of the fence, so to speak. Whether it's like, mature senior people talking about juniors, or juniors talking about, older generations. I think we have to acknowledge that there is a deep conflict of generations, especially in the tech industry. Things like, the differences between boomers and millennials with attention span and things like that, right? This is a famous, let's say, known meme. But also, I want to discuss about, expectations that we have from each other in different organizations and from the people that we interact with, also specific to this, to the generations. Things like, I'm not going to talk too much about this, but the amount of experience we have regarding certain technologies, whether they are new or not, but also the amount of stuff that we are supposed to acquire as technologists in order to be efficient and proficient in our jobs, right? So I'm sure you've seen this meme, so I'm not going to insist too much on them. But also, it's about nostalgia, right? A lot of let's say, more seasoned developers, senior developers I've been talking to, and not only developers, also people that have already transitioned into different roles like managers, even business executives. They always go back to the good old days when they were doing, and how great developing was, and how great working with developer was as an experience, and how difficult it is today, right? So that nostalgia is actually the reason why I added, the orange hair icon, because we know too well who was saying that we need to make America great again, right? So it's in the same area of addressing those that feel nostalgic about the good old days. Whether or not they have a reason, we are going to find out today, right? So another meme for that. Who is this for? First of all, is clearly for a different spectrum of developers, ranging from junior to senior. I'm sure that almost everybody in the room and everybody out of this room has been at some point in their professional life in some sort of conflict with somebody from a different generation, from a different age. And this is probably the most politically correct meme I could find about the differences in generations. If you search, you're going to find a lot of good material, but I didn't want to bring that up. Of course, this is also addressed for anybody from HR, if we have something like that in the room. I'm just trying to understand exactly how they can address the different generations. Also, anybody who's in management and decision-making when they get up in the office, or they check their email on the inbox, and they see things being on fire because of challenges across the board with people, again, from different generations. And obvious question, who am I again? Those of you that probably don't know me too well, I'm Ciprian Sorlea. I'm CTO at NordLogic Software, recently acquired by Arobs. So we are a born and raised company here in Cluj, now a bigger company, also born and raised in Cluj, or part of a bigger company. Up to recently, I used to tell that I'm Chief Barbecue Officer, and development and CTO is like a side job. But recently, some of my colleagues started to kind of take that job away from me, so I'm more like a barbecue consultant these days rather than a Chief Barbecue Officer, which is great, by the way. And I think I'm in a good spot as I kind of bridge, if you want, some of these generations that I'm going to be looking at today. So I'm sleep deprived as a Gen X, right? I'm impatient as a Gen Y, as a millennial, but I'm also digitally addicted as a Gen Z. And we're going to jump straight into, making programming great again. Now, we are going to look at 3 different kind of time frames. First of all, 2015 is the year when Gen Z enters the workspace. We have then 2000 when Gen Y enters the workspace, when millennial starts to work. And then we have the, time before that, when Gen X was already hard at work, right? And usually, these are those that have more anchor into the past, into certain things. And maybe this talk is mainly for them, but also for others who are really trying to understand, different generations. So we're going to analyze, and the purpose of this was that when last year at IT Days, I made the presentation about, the future of programming and future of technology in 10 years. And for this presentation, I was thinking like, okay, what if I go back to, what happened and try to look into it, but in a way that makes sense from a specific reason, not just analyze the technology or the evolution of technology, but rather to try to understand if maybe that evolution had any impact on the mindsets of the philosophies that could separate maybe some generations and could explain some of this gap. So we're going to look at programming languages, and really quickly, I'm just going to scroll through this. So we have, probably one of the oldest programming languages that most of you have heard, even though we have other COBOL and other languages that Peter mentioned a bit earlier, right? Clearly, there are other languages older than C++, older than C, that have been in use. But strictly, if we're referring to, in terms of our community, our tech community, probably C++ is the one that you've heard the most. And then we have many other languages that have evolved. And I'm just going to scroll through this. And what we see is that, we have a number of languages that appeared right about around the period where Gen Y started, and then we had a number of JVM languages that became popular, and then other languages, and so on and so forth. Oops, maybe I went a bit too fast. Okay. So clearly, if you look into this, you can already see some patterns, right? There are some languages, and maybe the development experience and the challenges that we had with those languages along the time, maybe it modeled the way every generation started to think about technology and how they perceive technology and how they perceive others in relation to technology, how they define their expectations. But is this enough to cause cross-gen disconnect, right? To cause this friction? Is this enough to invoke nostalgia over time and make us the more mature developers think like, oh, it used to be so much better back then, right? Maybe not, right? So if you really think through this, there are many programming languages, many technologies that even though they are quite old, they have been adopted or have been renewed over time, right? JavaScript is one of the languages that was, way back on the left side of the spectrum, and still it's really used and it's extremely popular in the newer generations of developers. So clearly, it can have some connection, but maybe not so much connection. So we're going to jump to something else. Persistence, right? And here we have different types of databases and persistent systems that were created over time. So we clearly see that before or during the Gen X time, right? So when only Gen X was active, we have the big relational databases created and being popular and in use, which clearly set some mindset for those that were using it, right? Structure, things like that, right? Things that maybe those that have started to use other technologies later were not so familiar with. But then, at the same time, we have other technologies which I think messed up a lot of minds back then, because it taught the developers to do a lot of stuff in the database. The database became an application server along with anything else, right? We built a lot of functionality into the databases. So structure, yeah, but also bad practices were also invented back then. And then after 2000, we had a lot of NoSQL databases, right, which had a different kind of data models, different approaches, different problems to be solved. And then developers, of course, missed maybe some of that structure. So maybe this is something that could help us understand why we're no longer having the same mindset between generations. But after looking through this, we can still see that, Postgres and MySQL were, back in the day, back in the first, cluster of technologies, and it's still being used today, right? And it helps even newer generations, and they embrace the technology without a problem. So maybe persistence is not necessarily a problem, but the way we work with those technologies could maybe drive some of the differences. We'll see. But still, it's good to look into that. And you can do the same with other things, right? You can apply this to other parts of the, let's say, stack. How about methodology and process, right? We had the talk about agile, and if you look about, how things used to be done, we see that all the way till 2000s, we had waterfall, and then towards the end of that, period, we started to have Scrum as still a process, but also a different approach to software development. Right after the tipping point, we started to have agile, and then we had other different methodologies and practices introduced. So maybe we can see here that we have a couple of, let's say, elements that were more focused on process rather than mindset. And maybe this is the difference. Maybe the older generations were more focused on doing things in a structured way, in an almost procedural way, with well-defined processes, with well-defined requirements, while the newer generation are more, fluid. They want to explore more, they want to innovate, they want to do design sprints and other things, right? Maybe, is this something that could impact? Because I've seen, developers, old developers, or let's say mature developers that are really agile, just as I've seen fresh new developers that are really stuck and stuck into the almost waterfall model. But I think what's important to also notice here is that we cannot only report to the developers or to the staff, to the people that are adopting these methodologies and practices, but also the organizations. And how, maybe, what was the organization back then, or how did a specific organization evolve over time, and which of those practices and transformations it went through, right? Because ultimately, an organization that was, let's say, in a difficult spot 20, 30 years ago, and went through the transformation is already in an agile state, maybe it's in a better state than a company that starts today and has no idea how to do things and is going to start all the way, waterfallish and let's say, less agile approach. So still, we can probably consider that the practices that developers and professionals who are exposed to maybe influence their mindset depending on the state of the company. So maybe we can connect to that. The next, and actually the last part that I'm going to look at in terms of what could cause the disconnect is the architecture and design, right? At different stages, we had different patterns, different approaches. And while some of them might be what we call in Romanian o ciorbă reîncălzită, right? So same thing being done and repositioned differently, I think there is some clear evolution, right? So we have monolith. I'm not going to go through all of this, but clearly this is like old school. Then we have service-oriented, microservices, serverless, already kind of stepping up in the Gen Y, lifetime. And then, of course, we have some other protocol. We have different protocols. But as we can see, we had RPC invented, 40 plus years ago, and gRPC, which became a trend and became a thing like less than a decade ago, right? Same concepts. And by the way, Corba is also ultimately a binary protocol, a communication protocol between services, same as with distributed component object models and so on. Many, many technologies evolved, but ultimately they kind of try to apply the same principles and improve over time, right? Then we had other things like event-driven, domain-driven design, CQRS. Many others might not be present here, but if we look over this, we can see that clearly in the left side of the timeline, we have architecture and design elements that are more enterprise, if you want, right? Even though we still have SOA and other things kind of slipping into the second part, but we see that strictly from the practice architectural and design elements that were popular and evangelized and so on and promoted were more agile, more dynamic, more modern approaches, right? Clearly. Now, is this enough to support, our mission to identify if this is the thing that generates gaps between generations? And maybe not. Strictly, if we look at those, I'm sure that there are people doing monoliths today, or really senior developers that have picked up serverless and doing amazing things with them. So maybe by itself is not a problem. But how about what is called Conway's law, which states that any organization that designs a system, defined broadly like software system, will produce a design whose structure is a copy of the organization's communication structure. So if we had organizations back in the 80s, 90s, early 20s, and so on, that were using old school architecture, old school methodologies, which empowered certain communication styles and structures, those that have been working with those in those styles actually took on that kind of mindset. If you bring those developers, business owners, project managers, whatever their role is, into an ecosystem where you need to have a different style of communication, how is that going to work? And especially if you look at what is called the inverse Conway's law, where we say, evolve your team and organizational structure to promote your desired architecture. Which kind of brings us to some, and I wanted to make this bigger so that everybody can see it, even bigger. And like I said, it's taking us to some conclusions. I think we are closing on time. Maybe we can draw some conclusions, but I'd like this to be an open conversation. I'm going to leave you with some conclusions, but I hope to also explore this with you afterwards. My findings and my overall experience in 30 years of experience of software development, right? My experience in experience. Okay. So my experience in 30 years of doing software development at different levels, in different roles, with different people, is that I genuinely find almost everybody I work with very, very few exceptions, to be not just okay, but formidable people. I don't care about where they're from. I don't care their age, education, other things. I find it extremely pleasant to work with any generation because people are inherently okay. However, I know that we are modeled by experiences, right? Whether it's a programming language that we work with, experimental or not, whether it's something that we were exposed to as part of our job or in university, I think all those little experiences are modeling our mindsets. Same thing with practices. If you have been working in an agile way or waterfall way, or have you experimented lean, or have you done a design sprinting and so on, because all those things are expanding our mind, not just our mindset, but also our mind. Our brain is really, elastic. So we can throw a lot of stuff into it. It's not going to blow up, trust me. And what happens is that the more you know about those things, even if they are different, you're going to start making some connections. There were endless presentations today where everybody was pointing out that everything depends. Context is king. You can only make decision if you know a wider area of possible solutions, possible options, possible outcomes, and then decide what's best for the current context. Otherwise, you're just going to take a wild guess, and it's as good as making no guess or making no decision. So, like I said, people are modeled by exposure to different things and to experiences, and by being able to understand those exposures, those experiences, we can understand those that we have to work with, and then we can work better with our stakeholders, our peers. So if you want to be able to work better with somebody from a different generation, with a different mindset, try to understand their mindset. You also have to, meet that person halfway and understand, what, combined generated the state of mind that that person has. When you start a new project, we often say that, okay, we'll figure it out, how we're going to do it. We're going to go with one style, and we're going to pivot if needed. And I think that ultimately it's a mistake. Even if, fail fast and things like that will help us to just go with whatever. But I think a bit of head thinking is important. Because for different approaches, for different architectures, for different solutions, we will need different mindsets. So bringing people in with different experiences can be extremely valuable because we get the big picture. We know from let's say, the older generation or the more experienced people can bring in, risk assessment much easier and understand exactly what can fail or what we can do to prevent failure. But also, they need to be aligned with everything else that is going to be built. If you bring in a person that has been doing, or not even as part of the core team, but rather as a, let's say, extended team. You have a stakeholder, a business, somebody from the business brings an external advisor / architect / whatever you want, business analyst, that is going to help you build a product faster. But he's stuck in, left side of the picture, and you're all the way on the right. If you don't work together, if you don't try to understand each other, I guarantee that there is going to be a continuous fight in trying to solve that and failing fast. But if you get to do that, it's actually going to be extremely helpful. So if you can bend the mindset, then bring people from, as we know, with a variety of experiences into the team, because it's going to be helpful. If you cannot do that, if you don't have the guarantee that the person is flexible enough, without proper training, without proper, taking that person on a proper journey to get into that spot, is going to be extremely difficult. Maybe, and just maybe, if you as an organization, or your organization, is still complaining that our old developers are too stubborn, or our younger developers are, too full of themselves, or whatever, they will say, I think that organization should leave the 90s, because it's 2013, 23, sorry. Yeah, so we've evolved. I mean, we need to be understanding the generations that we are working with, not just, go to the nostalgia and say people were better back then, because they were not. I always say that good decisions come from experience. Experience comes from bad decisions. Everybody in this room and out of this room who brags about having experience means that they took tons of bad decisions in their career. Myself included, I took plenty of those. But I'm happy to acknowledge that those helped me move forward, right? But it doesn't mean that I cannot understand that maybe others can do the same, and I'm trying to work with them to make sure that we are learning together from this process. Fourth thing that I will say as a conclusion is that not only organizations have to adapt, but also we as individuals, we need to look into this, because it's not just we are not just missing an opportunity to, upscale our CVs, because it's not just about that, but it's also about the fact that we're missing a great opportunity to understand others. What I'm trying to say here, those of you who've been, around in the early 2000s, probably, or even later, most likely were familiar with developers from, .NET or C# developers, and the kind of friendly fighting with the Java developers, right? And that was a well-known fact on, at the industry level. A lot of kind of hate almost between developers. I had teams many years ago, one Java team, one .NET team, and I brought them into the same room, and we started to do a lot of things together. And even though Java and C#, maybe they copied each other, and they continue to do from time to time, also have different approaches. And those developers started to work together and understand a bit more about what the other team is doing, how the other team is doing. And it's extremely valuable to look into that, despite the fact that it's not your core technology. And last, because the topic was, let's make development great again. My conclusion is that development was never greater than it is today. We live in a time that even, with all the scare that AI will take our jobs and AI will do this and do that, I will say developer has never been greater, and it will never be as lame as it is today. Not sure how many of you have noticed some of the technologies or some of the things there and look like, oh, that's so old school. Why do we even talk about that, like Corba or things like that, like 30, 40 years ago, right? Why do we need to know about that? Well, I'm sure that if I will be around in 40 years, and we will be looking at how we're doing things today, we will be laughing, like, come on, that's not how you do things. Why? Maybe not even 40 years, maybe 10 years, maybe 7 years, maybe 5. Every time technology evolves, and I think it's important for us to keep up with this, with what's coming, what's new. But I think it's also important to look a bit back and understand the background of those that we are working with, whether they are new ones, new generations, or older generations. I think we can maximize what we're doing, and we can really make development great by putting our brains together, no matter the generation we're from. And with that, I'm done. Thank you for your time, and if you have questions.
You run without a moderator, so yeah.
It happens.
So Cipri, yeah, let's see. I mean, we still have like half an hour.
No. I don't want to steal their coffee break, so yeah.
Yeah, I'll vote for Java, but that's my opinion. The second thing is, so basically all your slides, in my opinion, were about to be friend with the person you are working for. This is what I saw.
Not necessarily a friend, but rather understand that person, be in that person's shoes as much as you can, because that person has a unique context that you're not going to understand otherwise. And relationships are all about understanding the others and making sure that your thoughts are kind of filtered through that person's thoughts. Only then you can really understand the impact of what you're saying, what you're doing, and make sure that people are going to react a bit better.
Yeah, but what you are doing if you don't have that time? I mean, in order to understand someone, to get his feeling, I mean, you need some time. I mean, it's not like from today to tomorrow.
So that's why I said that companies need to do better when it comes to this kind of process, because if you put people from different generations without a flexible mindset that will organically, normally adopt and accommodate, the chances are that this is going to be almost as putting two chemical elements that can have a bad reaction, right? And then that's going to blow up.
Okay.
Right?
And one other thing I was thinking, these days, that we, or maybe our child, might be the latest generation of people who will actually work. How do you see this?
Well, I really hope that that's not going to be the case, even though I understand. I taught my daughter from very early that, and she actually took that to her heart, that when you love what you do, you don't have to work a single day of your life. I don't I don't go to work.
Yeah, actually, we don't work. I don't know about
Yeah,
you, but
so we don't work. I don't work, right? Sorry, guys, my colleagues here who believe that I'm working. No, I'm not. I love what I do.
well, looking at your Facebook picture, yeah, I believe you are
Okay,
not working.
don't consider traveling and other things. That's we need to have life as well, right?
Right.
So life goes beyond coding
It was too funny
beyond.
to not say it. So
Yeah. Okay, but the thing is that I love what I'm doing, and therefore I cannot conceive not doing this, whether it's for on a daily basis to be paid or on a daily basis to learn something. In the past couple of months, this has been the only day that I haven't written a single line of code. So I'm ashamed of that, but I'm also happy that I was able to pay attention to all the sessions. I love doing that, not to the degree that I was doing coding back in the day, but as part of me trying to understand a lot of what's going on, I know that I need to spend time into understanding the different, I don't know, bits and pieces that actually construct the mindset of a developer, the mindset of a professional. And it's not just about programming languages, about other things. And we don't have to spend time necessarily just, like I said, every day on doing that on purpose. But having the flexibility sometimes is as easy as getting a colleague out for a coffee or listening
exactly.
to him.
So that was the question. How do you make someone, how to get the fastest way to get, to understand someone? How do you do this? Based on your experience, not...
Informal, as much as
No,
possible.
you go to a coffee, you go to a lunch, you go to a team building.
Depends a lot on the person, the state of mind, both mine and that person's state of mind, the context, the shared interest, and many other things. I mean, there is no clear recipe. I wouldn't recommend something for you guys to go and do, but rather find your own way to connect more to people, understand them better. Maybe if you really need to work with somebody who's, I don't know, difficult or stubborn or, I don't know, whatever the treat will be, you just need to find a way to build a bridge. Not build fences and to stay isolated, but rather build a bridge. And the more you can understand regarding the stack, the background, it might be as simple as giving you some extra, I don't know,
yeah, like
topic
a peer
for
I mean, you can
conversation.
even go and say, okay, let's do a peer review, let's write code together, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that might be a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, sky's the limit with as long as we.
One more ugly question: are you responding to all your emails that is asking you something?
Depends on which kind of emails. If it's professional, if it's from colleagues or
professional, whatever. Are you
yeah,
responding to all emails? Always?
Yeah.
Okay.
Even if it's sorry, can do, or I'm not needed, so I kind of unsubscribe from the thread.
I mean, you respond.
I wouldn't say always. I try always to reply, but there might be some exceptions.
Okay. So with this, I think we don't have any questions. I don't actually see you, but
we have a question there.
Oh, okay. Can you come here? Okay.
If you don't mind, I'm going to stand up.
From your experience, I mean, you've presented a lot of programming languages, a lot of organizational models, a lot of databases, and not talking from a nostalgic point of view, but do you think that actually today coding and programming gets better, or is it actually getting trendy? Do you think that new ideas are actually better or just chosen by the trend?
Good question. Now, I'm going to tell you something. I have, this summer, actually, I have 30 years since I made my first Leo from programming. I'm not going to tell you what kind of programs I built, but, okay? Or I will tell you in the break. But, so I had my experience with different technologies. I've been playing with many more languages, not even listed there. And I'm surprised, even today, if you want, that sometimes I'm working with a junior colleague. And while I have sometimes disappointments and I see low quality code being written. I'm also sometimes surprised that I see code that has been exponentially better than what I used to write 10 years after I started coding. Because I had limited access to certain things. Solid principles and others were invented way after I started, right? So I kind of figured out what I need to do, and as developers, starting really early, we developed our own principles, and we saw when it's easier to maintain a code, but we never really had to maintain code back then. I remember I was in high school, not the first program I wrote, but some other program. I wrote from a bank, for a local bank. And I wrote that app, and I installed it to their system, and then I went to college, and in my second year of college, the director from the bank calls me and said, "Oh, we have an emergency, you need to come over, the program is crashing." And I was like, okay, what's going on? So I went there. After being in production for 5 years, it crashed because of the inflation. The currencies were so large that they were no longer fitting the table. So what I had to do is add another couple of zeros to the maximum size, and that was it, right? Back then, we didn't have that kind of problem because the requirements were really small. Maintenance of code was not that, at least not for me, when I started. But as I evolved professionally and I've learned more stuff and I got more exposure, of course, I had access to more and more information, and I realized how bad the code was, what I've written. But it was perfect at that time. But now I will, kick myself in the butt if I will do anything like that again. Now, newer generations had from the get-go experience with some better practices, better examples, better documentation. 30 years ago, if I wanted to learn about something, I had to email to an editor to get it from Theora to get the book. And at the end of the book, I got a small pamphlet with other books that I could order. So it took me 30 days to get the book, and then 30 days to get another book, and so on. Compared to what we have today, right? The amount of information that we can acquire and the amount of learning that we have at our disposal is incredible. And I will assume that a lot of that is actually creating better developers. That's why I'm saying that, we might be thinking that, oh, it used to be so good to do development back in the day. We did our own memory management in C++, right? Okay, that was crap, to be honest. Right? It was fun, and we felt good that we had no memory leaks, but we had almost no user experience built in our applications. And now if you give an app to a junior, he's going to already build a much better user experience than I was ever able to build, right? Because it had different exposures, different experiences. So that's what I'm trying to kind of talk about, is bridging those gaps. So maybe you as a senior, you look not at how good is the raw quality or how much a developer is thinking about all the problems that you had in the past. I'm sure as a senior developer, as a person, maybe going through some technology challenges, you have your scars, right? Everybody has. But the thing about scars is that we shouldn't be bringing them up just like vegans bring up the fact that they're vegans all the time, right? So we should keep them a bit hidden. We need to keep them for ourselves. We need to keep them to protect ourselves in the future, but not necessarily to showcase them all the time. So having said that, I think it's better to be doing development today, and I'm proud to see a lot of really good developers, even from the benches and even from the early exposure to programming.
Let's give some applauses.
Well, thank you.
I'll ask more questions, but we still need a break.
Yes.
So before, during this break, we open the bar, so there's some wine in the back. Take care. And then we'll have Peter's final presentation here on stage in about 20 minutes. Thank you, Ciprian.